A very happy morning, happy afternoon, happy evening based on what time you're watching this video, friends. Friends, I hope and pray that you guys are doing very healthy and staying safe. Also pray that your family members and friends are also very healthy and safe. Friends, let us go through your quick revision of your ITC. The most important topic you can tell about your GST. Now when you talk about your ITC, quickly you have to understand the provisions. Section 16. Your section 16 read along with Rule 36 and Rule 37 talks about eligibility and conditions for ITC. So when you talk about input tax credit, the main provision is section 16 read along with Rule 36, 37 which talks about your eligibility and conditions for your input tax credit. Thereafter you have your section 17 read along with Rule 42, 43 and also a special Rule 38. Section 17 basically talks about two things. One area is block credit, which is there without any rules, block credit, where you cannot get credit. So block credit has got no rules. Section 17 subsection 5, where the cases where you cannot take any credit, block credit. And you have proportionate credit. When you talk about proportionate credit for inputs and input services, it is Rule 42. For capital goods, it is Rule 43. And when you talk about proportionate credit for banking sector, there is a special rule for banking sector where they can opt for a special proportionate credit formula, which is Rule 38. So that is all about your section 17. Section 18 talks about ITC in special cases. Right, so section 18 you will have certain special cases where you can take credit or you have to reverse credit. So that is discussed in section 18 due to some change in the situation. Either you are in a position to take the credit or in a position to reverse the credit. Right, it is read along with Rule 40 and Rule 41, read along with 41A as well as 44. 40 talks about claiming credit in special cases, which means that there is a switch over from composition scheme to regular scheme or exempt supply to taxable supply or taking new registration. 41 talks about the transfer of credit in case of transfer of business. 41A talks about the transfer of credit in case of multiple registration with the same PAN number. So 41 and 41A are closely related. 41 and 41A are closely related. Both talks about transfer of credit. One in case of transfer of business, other in case of change. I mean, you're talking about taking multiple registration. Now 44 is talking about reversal. It has got various situations. Reversal will be there in case of switchover from your regular scheme to composition scheme or taxable supply to exempt supply or cancellation of registration. Even reversal of ITC will be there in case of sale of your capital goods. So it talks about reversal of credit in special circumstances. That is all about your section 18 read along with Rule 40, 41, 41A which talks about taking some credit and 44 which talks about reversing some credit. Then friends, it is all about your section 19 read along with Rule 45 which talks about ITC in a special scenario, job worker. So what happens when you're talking about job worker and what happens with respect to ITC, whether job worker can retain the credit or principal can retain the credit, and what are the documentation that has to follow, what are the returns that have to be filed. So that is discussed in section 19 read along with section 45. Then you have the last concept, ISD, input service distributor, section 20 read along with section 21 read along with Rule 39. So it talks about your input service distributor. So your input service distributor is a special concept which is discussed in section 20. Mainly section 20, 21 only talks about recovery and Rule 39. So that is all about the provisions that are important for your input tax credit. And you have to understand that the burden of proof of claiming input tax credit lies on the registered person. So if I am claiming input tax credit, I should prove that I am eligible. So section 155 tells that the burden of proof is always on the assessee to prove that he is eligible for that credit. If I am claiming input tax credit, I have to prove that the credit that I have claimed is genuine. So it lies on the assessee, not on the department. That burden of proof for ITC lies on the assessee, not on the department. That is said in section 155. Now quickly the definitions. All definitions are there under section 2. All simple definitions. When you talk about ITC, it is all about, friends, all about your purchases. So purchases can be categorized as goods and services. Goods can be further categorized as your inputs and capital goods. Inputs and capital goods. And your services is input services. So when you talk about your inputs and capital goods, what is the differentiating point? Differentiating point is if the goods are capitalized in your books of accounts, they are capital goods. And inputs means any goods other than capital goods. So things are pretty simple here. Capital goods means the goods which are capitalized in your books of accounts. and inputs means any goods other than capital goods. So when you talk about your purchases, it can be either your goods or your services. If it is goods, either it is capital goods or inputs. How capital goods? Capitalized capital goods in your books of accounts, balance sheet item. It's not capitalized. If it is not capital goods, then it is inputs. Input service means any service. Input service means any service, even if it is capitalized in your books of accounts. So these are the three important things on which you are going to take input tax credit. Inward supply. Now let's discuss about your next provision. You are talking about your inward supply and outward supply. Inward supply is in relation to a person, outward supply is in relation to a taxable person. Output tax, friends, is always in relation to a taxable person. ITC is always in relation to registered person, but output tax is in relation to taxable person. Now what is inward supply? Inward supply is quite simple. Inward supply means you are receiving the goods or services or both, either by way of purchase or acquisition or any other means. It may be with consideration or without consideration. So inward supply is quite simple. You are talking about receiving the goods or services. It can be either by way of purchase or acquisition or any other means, even getting something free of cost, gifts, receipt of gifts, any other thing, whether with or without consideration. You may pay for that, you may not pay for that. So it may be with consideration or maybe without consideration. Now outward supply, friends, is exactly what we are discussing in section 7 supply. Exactly. Outward supply in relation to taxable person means supply of goods or services of both. There were 8 points in supply, either by way of sale or transfer or barter or exchange or license or lease or rental or disposal. Same 8 things: sale, transfer, disposal, right? Then you have your barter or exchange, then you have your lease, rental or license or any other mode, right? Made or agreed to be made by such person in course of furtherance of business. So supply is always in relation to your business. So same thing that we are discussing in your supply definition section 7. Now input tax and input tax credit. All the definitions as discussed, friends, is always defined in section 2. So you have to just remember section 2. You don't need to remember the class number. Input tax and input tax credit. Now what is input tax, friends? Input tax can be tax charged by the supplier. See, this ITC is all about recipient, purchase. So you have to focus only from your purchase side. So your input tax is tax on purchases. Simple. Tax on purchases. That tax may be paid by the supplier. Forward charge mechanism. That tax may be paid by you. Reverse charge mechanism. That tax includes IGST portion of your customs duty. But it does not include composition tax, because composition tax, supplier cannot collect tax from you. Composition scheme dealer will give you a bill of supply without having tax portion. So your input tax means tax charged on supply of goods or services which is made to me. Supposing I am the recipient, the tax that is being charged by you as a supplier. It also includes tax payable under RCM, which means that if I am paying tax under RCM, that is also input tax. When I am paying RCM, I am paying it on my inward supply. So I will pay RCM by one hand cash ledger, I will get RCM input tax credit, in other hand credit ledger. So that always you have to remember about RCM. Always you have to discuss RCM in such a way. Pay RCM, one hand cash ledger, get RCM input tax credit, other hand credit ledger. So input tax includes RCM also. Input tax also includes IGST portion of import of goods. So on import of goods, technically it is customs duty, and one of the item of customs duty is IGST. You can take input tax credit of the same, but it excludes composition tax. Why composition tax it excludes? Because a composition scheme dealer, if I purchase from a composition scheme dealer, he cannot collect tax from me. He is going to give me bill of supply. He cannot collect tax. So there will be no tax on the document per se. So there is no input tax credit on that particular purchases. That is input tax. Now friends, what is input tax credit? The simplest definition. There are some input taxes on my purchases, whether under FCM or whether under FCM or RCM or IGST portion of import of goods, that is custom duty. But not all the items I will be eligible to take the credit. If I am eligible to take the credit, then it becomes input tax credit. If I am not eligible to take the credit, it is input tax, but I cannot take the credit, right? So out of say 10 items of input tax, I am eligible to take credit of 8 items. So 8 items will be called as input tax credit. Rest 2 are my input tax, but they will be added to my cost because I cannot take the credit. Now friends, under input tax credit there are 2 parts. One is availment, one is utilization. This is not part of definition. I am just talking about 2 parts, availment and utilization. Availment is the first step, utilization is the next step. Availment is upon satisfaction of certain conditions and it has got some time limit. Whereas utilization has got no condition, it has got restriction in a particular sequence. Restrictions are there, no conditions. You have to do in a particular way. So restrictions are there and there's no time limit for utilization. You can carry forward the credit indefinitely if at all credit is availed properly. Right, so that is an important point. Now friends, we are talking about your registered person. What is registered person? Simple. Because the input tax credit can be taken only by a registered person, so it is very important. A registered person means a person who was registered as per section 25. Who is registered but does not includes UIN. Right, international organization registration UIN is not included in it because they cannot take any credit. Registered person means a person who is registered as per section 25 but will not include UIN, unique identification number. Unique identification number. And zero rated supply. Again, it is relevant here. Normally, only if you are paying output tax, you can take the input tax credit. If you are not paying output tax, you cannot take input tax credit. But for zero rated supply, that is mainly your exports and supply to SEZ, you are not paying output tax. You are going under LUT or bond. You are not paying output tax, but still you can take input tax credit. So it is an exception. So what is the normal thumb rule? Pay output, take input tax credit. Don't pay output, no input tax credit. But for zero rated supply, even if you are not paying any output, you can claim input tax credit. So what is zero rated supply? It is nothing but export of goods or services, right, or supply of goods or services to special economic zone unit or special economic zone developer. These are all the small definitions that will be used in this particular chapter. Now, coming to the main part, you are talking about your availment of credit. Friends, your availment of credit is discussed in section 16, read along with rule 36 and 37. All the conditions are there on rule 36. One of the condition which is about time limit for payment to the supplier 180 days, it is under rule 37. Right. Now, what are the conditions that you have to remember? What are the conditions? Now, condition number 1. Let us go one by one. Condition number 1. The first condition is you should be a registered person. You should be a registered person. First condition. Second condition, those inward supplies should be used or intended to be used in course of furtherance of business. Rather, that was even within the definition of inputs, capital goods and input services. One of the common point which was there was these inputs, capital goods and input services should be used or intended to be used, right, in course or furtherance of business. So condition number 1 is you should be a registered person. Condition number 2, right, those inward supplies should be used or intended to be used in course or furtherance of business. And that credit will, if all the conditions are satisfied, the credit will go in your electronic credit ledger is what it is mentioned. Right, credit will go to electronic credit ledger if all the conditions are satisfied. And now what are the balance conditions? We have seen 2 conditions. You should be a registered person plus your inputs, capital goods, inputs, capital goods and input services should be used or intended to be used in course or furtherance of business. Now friends, let us move on to the next condition. You should have a tax paying document. You should have a tax paying document, which means if you want to take the credit, there should be a supporting document. And friends, this condition is applicable both for FCM case and RCM case. Now onwards, we will see what are the conditions which are applicable for both FCM and RCM, because there are few conditions which are applicable only for FCM, not applicable for RCM. So this condition is applicable both for a forward charge mechanism as well as reverse charge mechanism. This arrow mark symbolizes forward charge mechanism and this symbolizes reverse charge mechanism. Right, now what is this third condition? I should be having a supporting document. Now what are the supporting documents, friends, that you can have? Normally it is a tax invoice, but in special cases you can get supplementary tax invoice, which is otherwise called as debit note. In RCM cases there can be a self invoice, and in import of goods cases that is bill of entry. And if you are talking about head office, branch office transactions, head office giving the credit to branch office, it is input service distributors document. So these are the supporting documents that you should have for claiming the credit. Normally it is tax invoice. Special cases, supplementary invoice or debit note. Or if you are talking about RCM, self invoice. I have to create invoice on my own. Recipient has to create invoice on his own. Or if you are talking about import of goods, it is bill of entry. Or if you are talking about the head office giving credit to branch office, it is ISD document, input service distributors document. Now friends, if you go through document chapters, there will be lot of contents that should be there on the supporting document. For as a recipient, that supplier should put a lot of things on the supporting, on tax invoice or supplementary invoice, etc., etc. But as a recipient, should you see all these contents are present in the document? No. Government tells that as a recipient, you focus only on the important materials. When you get a document, this entire chapter ITC is all about recipient. So I am the recipient. When you get a document as a recipient, I'll see whether the main elements are present. And if the main elements are present, I can take input tax credit. Supplier has to put a lot of contents, but I have to see that main elements are there or not for me to take the credit. So as a recipient, what all things that I should see on the supporting document for me to take the credit? GST number of the supplier and the recipient, description of the goods and services, value should be there, tax should be there, place of supply in case of interstate supply, which means that I should focus only on these 5 elements. Other contents, whether or not they are there on the supporting document, I should not be worried. It is a headache of the supplier. I should be worried only about GST number of supplier and myself, recipient. Next, you are talking about description. Next, you are talking about value. Next, you are talking about tax. Last, you are talking about place of supply. If these 5 things are there, I can take the input tax credit. Right? Other things, even signature is not required. See, supplier should also put signature. But whether or not signature is there, for me, I should check only these 5 contents. Even if signature is not there, I can take the credit. That is the point. I should only focus on these 5 elements. If these 5 elements are there, I can take the credit. Other elements, if they are not there on the supporting document, it is a headache of the supplier, not of the recipient. Next, you are talking about the 4th condition. Now, what is the 4th condition? I should receive the goods or services. I should receive the goods or services. I should receive that supporting document plus I should receive the goods or services. Only if I receive the goods or services, I can take the credit, and this condition is also applicable for both forward charge mechanism as well as reverse charge mechanism. I should receive it. I should receive the goods or services. Now, there are 2 special scenarios here. What are the 2 special scenarios? Let us discuss that and let us close this condition. Now, first, a special scenario. If on my behalf, I am the recipient in this entire discussion of ITC. So, if I ask my supplier to deliver the goods to a third person on behalf of me. Say I am asking my supplier to deliver the goods directly to my job worker or directly to my customer. So, I am there in Mumbai, my supplier is there in Delhi. I am asking my supplier in Delhi to deliver the goods in Kolkata. In Kolkata, there is some person, he may be my job worker or my customer, that is of no use. That is of no importance. Right. So, what I am trying to tell, the goods are being received by another person. The goods are being received by a person in Kolkata on behalf of the recipient. It is equal to goods received by the recipient. In simple language, goods received by a third person on behalf of recipient is equal to goods received by recipient himself. I can take the credit. Though physically I have not received the goods, but from Delhi the goods have been dispatched to Kolkata. Some person, my representative, whether he is my job worker or my agent or my customer, whomsoever he is, he has received the goods. So, receipt of goods by third person on behalf of recipient is equal to receipt of goods by recipient. Therefore, I can take the credit. Can my job worker take the credit? No. Can my agent take the credit? No. Can my customer take the credit based on the invoice of my supplier? No. I can take the credit. So, what is the point mentioned here? A very simple point that is mentioned here is deemed receipt of goods or services. In case of bill to ship to, the supplier has billed it to me but shipped it to some other person. In case of bill to ship to transaction, receipt of goods by third person on behalf of the recipient is equal to receipt of goods by recipient himself, deemed receipt. So, I can take the credit. Now, one more specialized case is that when goods are received in lots or installments. The previous point, bill to ship to, is applicable both for goods as well as for services. But this exception, special point, is applicable only for goods. When the goods are received in lots or installment, I can take the credit only and on the receipt of last installment. I can take the credit only on the receipt of last installment. Right? If the goods are received in 10 installments, one invoice, 10 installments, can I take the credit in the beginning? No. Can I take credit proportionately over a period of time, 10 times proportionately? No. I can take the entire credit of that entire lots, all the 10 lots, only on the receipt of last lot. If there is a single invoice, 10 installments, I cannot take the credit in the beginning. I cannot take the credit proportionately. I can take the credit only on the receipt of last lot or installment of goods. This you have to understand. Right? This is the 4th condition, receipt of goods or services. Now, the 5th condition. Fifth condition talks about payment of tax by the supplier. See, when strictly speaking, you have to remember that all the conditions are from the angle of recipient. I have to satisfy something. I am the recipient for this entire discussion of ITC. I have to satisfy certain condition. But for me to take the credit, now I am dependent on my supplier. So if I want to take the credit, my supplier should have paid the tax. My supplier should have paid the tax. But this is not applicable for RCM. It is applicable only for FCM. It is applicable only for FCM. So this point that my supplier should have paid the tax is not applicable for RCM. And the special note is not there because there is no provisional ITC, final ITC concept. There is a note mentioned there. Now, what are we trying to understand here? Only if my supplier pays the tax, I can take the credit. But you have to understand that this is not being checked on real time. You get questions by ICAI telling that supplier has not paid the tax. Still, you can take the credit because this will not be checked real time. This will be checked later on. This will be checked later on by the departmental officials. So if you get a question where question is stating that you have made the payment to the supplier but supplier has not paid the tax to the government, still you can take the credit. This will be taken care by the department at a later point of time, where department will tell that no, supplier has not paid the tax, you reverse the input tax credit. So this condition, two special points. First, it is not dependent on the recipient. I don't have any control. My supplier should have paid the output tax. Second, this will not be checked real time. This will be checked later on by the departmental officials. And third important point, it is not applicable for RCM. And as a note that is mentioned here, what is that note? This note clearly tells that this condition has become diluted. It is of no importance now, because there's one last condition which is based on GSTR 1 of the supplier, Rule 36 sub Rule 4. So when we see one of the last condition, totally 10 conditions are there. When you see the 11th condition, you will find Rule 36 sub Rule 4, where again supplier has to do something for me to take the credit. Here supplier has to pay tax, output tax, for me to take input tax credit. This will not be checked real time. This will be checked later on by the departmental officials. This condition is not applicable for RCM, and moreover this condition is not of so much importance because of another condition where they tell that supplier, you put the transactions in GSTR 1, recipient you get the transactions in GSTR 2A, 2B, and you take the credit. So this you have to understand. Right, fifth condition. Sixth, filing of returns. Now this all is based on recipient. All the other conditions, recipient has to satisfy. This point, supplier has to do something for recipient to take credit. That was condition number 5. Now condition number 6, only if I file my returns, I can get the credit in electronic credit ledger. So only and only if I am filing my returns, if I want to take the credit, I may have crores of credit in my books of accounts. If I want to get the credit in my portal, I have to file my returns. This is applicable both for forward charge mechanism as well as for reverse charge mechanism. So recipient, if he wants to take the credit, he has to file his return showing both outward supply and inward supply. On inward supplies, he will get input tax credit. This is condition number 6. Now condition number 7. When you talk about condition number 7, condition number 7 tells that I should not claim depreciation on GST portion. This is actually only for capital goods. I should not claim depreciation on GST portion. Supposing that's the purchase of capital goods, 10 crores plus GST. On 10 crores I can claim depreciation, but on GST portion, supposing GST portion is 18%, that is 1 crore 80 lakhs. On 1 crore 80 lakhs I should not claim depreciation. Obviously 10 crores I will claim depreciation, but on 1 crore 80 lakhs I should not, GST portion, I should not claim depreciation. If I claim depreciation, then I cannot get credit. I cannot get my credit. This is also applicable for both forward charge as well as reverse charge. See, my tax on purchases can either be my cost or I can take the credit. I cannot enjoy both. The logic is pretty simple. If I am claiming depreciation on GST portion of capital goods, that is 1 crore 80 lakhs, it means I have treated it as cost. My entire capital goods will be 11 crore 80 lakhs, which means I have treated it as cost. Right? What are they trying to tell? You record capital goods only at 10 crores. This 1 crore 80 lakhs, you don't claim depreciation, take under current assets input tax credit. Either I can get the benefit of depreciation or I can get the benefit of input tax credit. I cannot get the benefit of both. So on 1 crore 80 lakhs, forget about 10 crores. 10 crores it is purely depreciation. On GST portion, 1 crore 80 lakhs, either I have to treat it as cost and claim depreciation or I can take input tax credit. Both are mutually exclusive. I cannot enjoy both. Next, Next friends, condition number 8, it is talking about availing input tax credit, time limit for availing your input tax credit. What is the time limit for availing input tax credit? Now friends, the time limit for availing input tax credit is September of next financial, due date of filing of September of next financial year or actual date of filing of your annual return whichever is earlier. So you have to see, I cannot take credit after but that particular date. So what is the time limit for me to take the credit? It is due date of filing September month return of next financial year. So if at all it is financial year say 22-23, due date of filing September month return of September month return of next financial year means due date of filing of return of September 2023. So after the year is over, I still have at least 6 months time to take the credit. So due date of filing, it's not actual date friends, it is due date. It is not actual date, it is due date of filing September month return of next financial year or actual date of filing of annual return of that financial year. So if it is financial year 22-23, due date of monthly return, that is September 2023, or actual date of filing annual return for that financial year. So I have to file annual return for financial year 22-23, the year which got over. So I have to see when I have filed my annual return. Right, assuming I have due date of filing of September month return of next financial year will be 20th of October. Right, assume normally it will be say 20th of October 2023. For financial year 22-23, it is 20th of October 2023. Now I have to ensure that if at all I have already filed my annual return on say 30th of August. So last date for taking the credit was 30th of August. Because 20th of October 2023 or 30th of August 2023, whichever is earlier. Now this annual return, that's a difference. First difference is it is actual date. Second difference is of that year, not the next year, of that particular year. Now assume that annual return for financial year 22-23, I have filed it on say 20th of November. Then due date of September of next financial year is 20th of October 2023. And annual return I have filed on 20th of November 2023, whichever is earlier. Now I can take the credit in the September month return, which I have to file before 20th of October 2023. So that point you have to remember, that's the time limit for taking the credit. Now friends, the next condition you are talking about, friends, this condition, time limit condition is also applicable for both FCM as well as RCM. Now you are talking about the next condition where you are talking about the recipient. If I am taking the credit, I should make the payment to the supplier within 180 days. Not only the price but also the tax. I should make the payment of price plus tax to the supplier within 180 days. But friends, this condition is applicable only for FCM. It is not applicable for RCM. This condition that recipient should make the payment of value plus tax to the supplier within 180 days is not applicable for RCM, is not applicable for Schedule 1 cases, which means supply without consideration. As there is no consideration, obviously there will be no payment. Is not applicable when the recipient has made the payment to the third party on behalf of supplier. Right. Now in RCM, why it is not applicable? Because in RCM I pay the tax, I take the credit. So whether or not I have made the payment to the supplier, they tell that forget about it. Schedule 1 cases, supply without consideration, there is no consideration, therefore I am not going to make any payment, therefore this condition is not applicable. Third point, I have made the payment to third party. So if I have to pay 1 crore to the supplier, out of that 30 lakhs I have paid to third party on behalf of supplier. Now I have already paid 30 lakhs to third party on behalf of supplier. To the supplier I am going to pay only 70 lakhs. So to the supplier I am going to pay 70 lakhs. 30 lakhs forget about it because I have already paid to someone on behalf of supplier. Payment by the recipient to third party on behalf of supplier. In these three cases, this condition of payment within 180 days is not applicable. Now, are they trying to tell that you should make the payment then take the credit? No. First you take the credit. If at all you make the payment within 180 days, no problem, retain the credit. If you don't make the payment within 180 days, if you don't make the payment within 180 days from the date of issuance of invoice, what will happen? ITC that you have paid has to be reversed with interest proportionately, right, to the extent of non-payment, not the entire ITC, to the extent of non-payment. And in this case, friends, interest will start from the date of availing ITC. 180 days will start from the date of invoice. So you have to see from the date of invoice 180 days. If you have made the payment, okay. If you have not made the payment, reverse that ITC, proportionate ITC to the extent of non-payment with interest. And interest will start not from the date of invoice, it will start from the date of availing of ITC till the date of reversal. And if you tell subsequently if there is a payment, no problem. Subsequently if there is a payment, you can re-avail the credit. Whatever subsequent, the moment you have made the payment, subsequent payment, you can re-avail the credit, and time limit for such re-availment is not there. There's no time limit. Re-availment, there's no time limit. If you made the payment subsequently, I have booked entire ITC, I did not make the payment, so I have reversed the ITC. Subsequently I make the payment, I can re-avail the ITC. But the difference is, initially I have availed ITC, when I did not make the payment within 180 days, I reversed the ITC with interest. Now interest is a cost. And after 180 days, after 2 years, I have made the payment, I can re-avail the ITC, but I can re-avail only ITC, not the interest portion. Interest paid cannot be claimed back. Interest is my cost. Right. Step number 1, claim the credit, pay within 180 days. Okay, don't pay within 180 days. Step number 2, reverse ITC with interest. Interest is also extra. And this happens after 180 days. Say after that, say after 2 years, 3 years, you make the payment, re-avail the credit. But when you re-avail the credit, you will get only the tax portion, not the interest portion. Right. That is condition number 9. Friends, now you are talking about condition number 10. Right. If at all it is a fraud case and the supplier has paid the tax, you cannot take the credit. No ITC. No ITC if tax is paid by the supplier based on demand order for a fraudulent case. If your supplier is making the payment of tax based on a demand order based on fraud. So if it is a bona fide case, recipient can take the credit. So my supplier has done fraud, department has catch hold of him. Now he is trying to pay tax, he is trying to give me the credit. Can I take the credit? No. But if it was a bona fide case, I could have taken the credit. As it is a fraudulent case, I cannot take the credit. I cannot take the credit. So if supplier is making the payment of tax based on demand order which is due to fraud, then I cannot take the credit. If it is bona fide case, I could have taken the credit. Now this condition is also applicable for FCM as well as your RCM. Now the last condition, that is the 11th condition that we are discussing. All these 10 conditions we have discussed completely. Now we are focusing on the last condition, 11th condition. You have to remember that this condition again depends on the supplier. This condition tells that supplier should have filed his GSTR 1 so that you get the credit in your GSTR 2A. Right, supplier should have filed his return, outward supplies return GSTR 1. There is a return called as GSTR 1, and you will get that details in GSTR 2A. Only if it is there in your GSTR 2A, you can take the credit plus a extra portion 10%. Right, what ITC I can avail? ITC that can be availed is amount that is appearing in my GSTR 2A, eligible ITC that is appearing on my GSTR 2A when? As on the due date of filing GSTR 1. So supplier should file his transaction in GSTR 1. Supplier sales is recipient's purchase. So supplier should file his sales transaction in GSTR 1 to enable recipient to take credit in GSTR 2A. But when? Supplier should file his sales in GSTR 1. One more condition is within the due date of GSTR 1. If it is filed after the due date of GSTR 1, I will get in my GSTR 2A. But that is after the due date. So I cannot take in that month, I have to take in the next month. So supplier should file his GSTR 1 and he should file within the due date so that I can get that credit in my GSTR 2A. Plus I can take extra 10%. Extra 10%. Can I take this amount as credit? No. I should compare this with my books credit, eligible books credit. Maximum will be my eligible books credit. We have to see this with the help of example, only then things will make sense. Maximum is, this should be compared with your books credit. But wait, this particular case, you have to remember that it is applicable only for your FCM. It is not applicable for RCM. This condition is applicable only for FCM. This condition, rule 36 sub rule 4 is not applicable for your RCM. Now, it is not applicable for certain other cases as well. It is not applicable for RCM. It is not applicable for import of goods. I can take the credit of IGST portion of customs duty, but whether or not it is there in my GSTR 2A, I can take the credit. It is not also applicable for invoices of input service distributor. It is also not applicable for invoices of NRTP. Right. Now, in all these 4 cases, RCM, IGST portion in case of import of goods, ISD and NRTP, whether or not I get in my GSTR 2A, I can take the credit. So in all these 4 cases, friends, what are they trying to tell? They are trying to tell that whether or not I get in my GSTR 2A. Even if I don't get in my GSTR 2A, I can still take my input tax credit. I can still take my input tax credit. In our same scenario, IGST portion of import of goods on customs duty in case of import of goods, ISD invoices and NRDP invoices. Now this rule 36(4) has to be applied cumulatively. It's not that I have to see each and every invoice. For each and every invoice, I am not going to apply 110%. It has to be applied cumulatively. It has to be applied cumulatively, not supplier wise, but it has to be done tax wise. I have to do it separately for CGST, separately for SGST, separately for IGST. So extra 110% of CGST and SGST cannot be set off against IGST. It has to be done tax wise. It need not be done supplier wise. I can see all the eligible cases together and then apply 110%. But it should be done tax wise. Separately I have to do calculated for CGST, separately for SGST, separately for IGST. If I get something excess in CGST and SGST, I cannot use it for IGST shortage, or vice versa. I cannot do that. Right. Now, if at all I get that credit later on, what to do? I can claim it in the next month. This was what is the last point. Now, how to understand this is easy when you take an example. Right. Supposing you are talking about the month of June. In June, you have in your books credit 1 lakh. Now, obviously, we are talking about a case where it is not a RCM case, or you are not talking about your IGST portion of customs duty, you are not talking about ISD invoices, NRDP invoices, because these cases, whether or not they are there in your 2A, you can take the credit. In ITC, I mean GSTR 2A, you are getting 60,000. It's not ITC 2A, it's ITC in GSTR 2A, you are getting 60,000. Now, what is the credit that I can take in the month of June? It is 110% of what is there in GSTR 2A, that is 66,000. That is 66,000, or book credit 1 lakh, whichever is lower. I can take 66,000. Now you have to understand that what is the leftover. There is some leftover portion of credit, June credit. I have to still take the balance credit of June, which is 34,000. It's still left out. Can I take it? Yes. If I get the balance items which are not there reflected now in my GSTR 2A, I can get it later on. Few of my suppliers are filing their GSTR 1 late, so I will get it late in my GSTR 2A. I can get later on. I may get later on rather. Now next, in July. So that is all about June. Though in my books the credit is 1 lakh, I can take in my returns only 66,000. 60,000 what is appearing in GSTR 2A plus 10% extra. July month, my book credit is 2 lakh. Now, July month GSTR 2A shows 1,50,000. 1,50,000. So, July month 1,50,000 means what credit I can take? So, for July month I can take the credit of 1,50,000 multiplied by 110%, that is 1,65,000, or 2 lakhs. 1,65,000 or 2 lakhs, whichever is lower. So, I am going to take 1,65,000. 1,65,000, which means there is a leftover credit. There is a leftover credit of 35,000 for July. But wait, the point is not over here. July month is not yet over. In July month, I get extra credit of June month also, which means that few suppliers who did not file their GSTR 1 of June in time, now they have filed. So I have to again go and see my June GSTR 2A, because that is a balance credit of June. I again go and see the June GSTR 2A. Now I find in June that I have got 95,000. Earlier it was 60,000. Now I have got 95,000. I have just written the excess amount, 35,000. I have got 35,000 more. I have got 35,000 more. Last month when I saw GSTR 2 of June, it was 60,000. Now when I am seeing, it is 95,000. I have got 35,000 more. Now what I am going to do? I am going to take the leftover credit. 35,000 also I can take the credit multiplied by 110%, which is 38,500. But will I take entire 38,500? No. My leftover credit of June was only 34,000. So 38,500 or 34,000, whichever is lower. So my entire 34,000 which was not taken, I will take. Now important point is, as per calculation of 110%, I am eligible to take 38,500. But why? Excess 35,000 multiplied by 110% is 38,500, but I cannot take 38,500 8,500 because my leftover portion of credit, what was the credit that I did not take was only 34,000. I cannot take extra. By applying this 110%, I cannot take extra credit. So leftover portion was only 34,000. So I am going to add 34,000. Now if you add 1,65,000 July credit as per GSTR 2A and 34,000 balance credit of June which is taken in the month of July, it is 1,99,000. It is 1,99,000. Now there is no leftover portion of June credit, it is 0. But still, July credit for 35,000 is still to be taken. Now let us take the next month. We are talking about August. August month, my book credit is 3 lakh. August month, GSTR 2A shows 2,90,000. Wait. So 2,90,000 multiplied by 110% will give me some 3,90,000. Can I take 3,90,000 credit? No. My maximum credit that I can take is my book credit. So I can take only 3 lakhs. I can take only 3 lakhs. So August month there is no leftover credit. I can take only 3 lakhs. So 3 lakhs I am going to take. But wait. When I am seeing there was some leftover portion of July credit. So when I am going back and seeing July month credit, earlier July month GSTR 2A showed me 1,50,000. Now it is showing 1,80,000. So I am getting excess 30,000. I am getting excess 30,000. Now that excess 30,000 for July, I'll be taking the credit in the month of August. So 30,000 multiplied by 110% which is 33,000. But what was the leftover portion? The leftover portion was only 35,000. Leftover portion was 35,000. So I am going to take only 33,000. Why? Leftover portion is more, 35,000. But I am going to take only 33,000. 30,000 multiplied by 110% which is 33,000. So I am going to take the credit of 3 lakh, which is for August, 33,000 which is July month leftover credit taken in August. Am I going to take anything in June? June month I need not even see. I need not see my GSTR 2A in June month. Why I should not see? Because already every credit is taken. So June month I will be 0. I am not at all seeing. Practically I will not even open June month GSTR 2A again. Why? I have got entire credit of June month. Right. So June month there was nothing left over. I am not going to take anything. Nothing left over was there. July month there was leftover of what? There was leftover of 35,000, out of which I am taking 33,000. So 3 lakh plus 33,000, how much credit I will take? 3,33,000. But still, July month there is some leftover credit. July month there is some leftover credit. What is that leftover credit? Out of that 35,000, I am taking 33,000. That is leftover credit of 2,000. I have totally taken the credit of 1,98,000. That's leftover credit of 2,000. Why that's leftover credit of 2,000? July month credit in July month I have taken 1,99,000. Rather, July month credit in the month of July I have taken 1,65,000. July month credit in the month of August I have taken 33,000. So 1,65,000 plus 33,000 is 1,98,000. So that's leftover credit. So out of 35,000, I have taken 33,000. So that's leftover of 2,000. That's leftover 2,000, which I have to again. When I go in September, I need not be worried about June and August because entire credit is taken. I should be worried about July. So I should open my GSTR 2 of July again and work it out. Right, this type of questions may not be asked by ICAI, but still you have to be aware of the fact that this checking we will be doing month on month every time. So whenever there is leftover credit of a particular month because of GSTR 2A plus 10% or books whichever is lower, whenever there is a leftover credit portion, that month GSTR 2A you have to open next month again also to see whether the leftover credits have been reflected in your GSTR 2A or not. So that portion you have to work again and again. Friends, that is all about your 36.4. So this entirely completes your conditions for taking your input tax credit. All these 11 conditions should be satisfied for you to take your input tax credit.